Wow. Abshai is behind you. That's funny.
Big man.
Yes. All right, Chevra, good morning. God willing, we are learning today Yerushalmi Demai, Perek Aleph, Halachet Dalid. We are learning the final, entire, complete daf of Hakalin of Perek Rishon. In the dafim, we are learning today daf Yud Beis. We left off on daf Yud Aleph Amid Beis by the two dots, 6 lines before the bottom of the Amid. And even though it's a short daf today, we're going to be learning some real foundational principles when it comes to separating Trumas from Maasros. Ubehegdem, all of this will be based on what we learned in Halacha Daled in the Mishnah, that when you take Maasros from the Mai out of order, and let's remind ourselves that what you are really separating from the Mai, ideally, is Trumas Maaseh and Maaser Sheni. But we have to appreciate that Trumas Maaseh is a separation from Maaser Rishon. So what's really happening is that you're separating Maaser Rishon from it. You're taking off Maaser Min HaMaaser, even though we keep on repeating, and it's good to keep on reviewing that the Maaser Rishon itself is not gifted to a Levi because of the rule of Hamoitzim Achaveri all about Ayam, but that's about not giving it to the Levi. But really, when we say that the owner of the Mai, the Chaver, is Chayiv normally to separate Trumas Maaser, that implies that he's really separating Maaser Rishon and Trumas Maaser, and then he has to separate Maaser Sheni. Question is, what happens if the person, the Chaver, goes out of order? So as we learned, when it comes to Tevel, Vadai, number one, there is a lav to go out of order, as the Rashi Elio quoted the pasuk, Meliyoscha v'dimacher, V'dimacha loisa ached normally means do not delay. In this context, it's understood to mean don't go out of order. That which has to come first should come first. That which comes second has to come second. Third. Number one, if you go out of order, you violate a law. Number two, if you violated this law, if you went out of order, you are not able to. You cannot, and you do not articulate the vidui meiser that's normally said twice in the cycle of Shemitah. Masha enken by the Mai. At least b'di'evid, you can go out of order. And actually, as we'll begin today's sugya, according to some Amoraim, even though it's not mashma so from the words of the Mishnah, you can lechatchila go out of order. Okay, that will be the base, the basis for the following discussion. Now, a few words of introduction are needed, and I really hope that the Olam, even if they come a few minutes later, they'll be able to have properly the shakal v'tariya that we will have in today's externally short daf. First of all, we have to understand, number one, that earlier tithes are exempted from the latter ones. Now, Chevra, halkop, what that means. When a person designates Maaser Rishon to give to the Levi, we're speaking about normal tevin. That Maaser Rishon is completely exempted from Maaser Sheni. You can argue, how can the Levi take the Maaser Rishon and eat it? From the Maaser Rishon that the Levi received, no one removed the Maaser Sheni. But that's the rule, that the earlier tithes are exempted from the latter ones. It's the latter ones that are obligated in the earlier ones. And the same thing in truth goes to Truma Gedolah. When you separate now the Midrabanan, let's say the average 2%, to give it to the Kohen, you have 100 apples. You give 2 apples to the Kohen. Those 2 apples never had from it, not Maaser Rishon removed, not Maaser Sheni or Maaser Ani removed. It doesn't matter. It's only the latter ones that are obligated to have the prior ones removed from it. And if you didn't, in other words, if a person normally would remove Maaser Sheni before Maaser Rishon, you can argue that product, that Maaser Sheni, is still Tevel, because Maaser Rishon that should have been removed from it was not. You have to remember this. Normally, Chevra, step number 2, produce from which Maaser Sheni is removed, produce from which, not the Maaser Sheni, from which Maaser Sheni is removed, already is rectified from Maaser Rishon. And since it's already rectified from Maaser Rishon, Chavra, I know I'm going to repeat his words again, that Meiser Sheni may never become later Meiser Rishon. Let me tell you what I mean by that. When you separate Meiser Sheni, the last sugya we learned yesterday, and something that we continuously learn, the Torah allows for the Meiser Sheni to be redeemed, right? And that Meiser Sheni becomes bona fide chulin. Question is, if someone separated Meiser Sheni and then they redeemed it, can that Meiser Sheni itself be designated as Meiser Rishon for other produce? And the answer is normally never. But why not? Because since Meiser Sheni was already rectified from Meiser Rishon, it had from it Meiser Rishon removed. So it's completely removed from Meiser Rishon, which is why normally it may never become designated as Meiser Rishon. However, now the real one topic that we'll discuss today is, once we establish in the Mishnah, at least b'diavad, by demai, you can separate it out of order, post facto, maybe even pre facto. That means by demai it's shaykh for you to remove Meiser Sheni prior to Meiser Rishon / Trumas Meiser being removed. Question will be, can you in this scenario, after designating the Meiser Sheni, redeem it and then designate it or some of it as Meiser Rishon Trumas Meiser? That's the question we'll have in the Gemara. Notes here, it might be allowed because Meiser Rishon was never removed from it before it itself was designated as Meiser Sheni. The Gemara is going to suggest that yes, you could, and that will be challenged. So first of all, we're going to challenge it from a Mishnah, from a Braisa. It's going to get a little bit evolved. We all remember a simple rule that ein mafrishin min aptur ala chiyuv. That means that if you have two baskets of produce, and if a person, instead of separating from each one its own trumas or maisves, generally you are allowed to remove from one on it and another. You are allowed to do that. I know by Truma Gedoyla there has to be a din min hamukaf. We're not even going to speak about it right now. Let's speak about just the maisves. You can separate maisves from within, and you can separate maisves from without. Let's become familiar with these words. Separating maisves from within means I have a basket, I have a pile, and from it, I separate avada, the Truma Gedoyla, and I separate the Meiser Rishon, and I separate the Meiser Sheni, or I can have a pile of produce. I don't want to separate anything from it. I have food elsewhere. I am allowed to separate Meisres from without. Okay, that's Pshita. What gets exciting, which is something that I don't remember ever learning about, is that there will be nuance, there'll be little nafkaminos, particularly in quantity, whether that will depend whether you are removing trumas or maisres from within versus whether you are removing trumas or maisres from without. L'mashal, I really need everyone to pay attention over here. When you have, let's say, a basket of 100 apples, and let's already always speak about Truma Gedoyla was already removed. After you remove the Truma Gedoyla, you have 100 apples left. How much Meiser Rishon and Meiser Sheni will you have removed? Who knows the number? Meiser Rishon is 10%. So you take 10. How much do you have left? 90. Remember, guys, 90 mesukan from Meiser Rishon is because you have another 10 that is the Meiser Rishon. Now, how much will you remove from the 9 as Meiser Sheni? Let's speak about the 4 years of the 7-year cycle. You have Meiser Sheni 9. So what's the total number that you removed? You removed 19. I'm already going after the Truma Gedoyla. I want you to know that if you have a basket of 100 apples and you're not removing the Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni from within it, but you have another pile of, let's say, 100 apples, and you want to remove the Trumas or Meisers from basket 1, you want to remove it from basket 2, from barrel 2, you will end up removing a lot more than the 19. And we're going to go into the detailed numbers when we learn the Gemara inside. And that's obvious, because if you removed it from within, if from the 90 that remains, you gave off 10, that means 10, Meiser Rishon, is only Misakin 90. 10 cannot be Misakin 100. And we're going to see how these numbers will ultimately lead us to our current discussion. Another final word of introduction, that when you remove the Maiseris from within, after the Maiserishan is removed, Kevan, like we said in this example, you only have 90 left. Only the amount that remains is subject to Maiser Sheni. Which is why I mentioned Maiser Sheni won't be 10, will be only 9. But if I'm removing Maiseris from without, and therefore we're saying that I have 100, I want to be Mesaken this 100 by removing Maiserishan elsewhere, even after you removed, and it's not going to be 10, it's going to be more. All of what remains is used for the Maiser Sheni Cheshben. All of what remains.
Is that from the first or the second?
If I have basket 1, Kevan, and I'm not taking anything off basket 1, I'm using basket 2 to fix, to be Mesaken basket 1.
Got it.
So not only will the number of how many apples in basket 2 will be designated for Maiser Rishon be more than 10, but it's more than that. When it comes to the Maiser Sheni, normally Maiser Sheni, whatever remains from the 90, you give 9. What remained was 100. And the Maiser Sheni has to be on all of the 100. And it won't even be 10. It's going to be more. We're going to see it's going to be 11.1. You're going to end up giving, instead of 19, you're going to end up giving 22.2. All of that is something that we'll learn inside. But why is that? The ikir will be, that will come back to our sugya, is that, again, normally after you remove Maiser Rishon, that's it. Only what remains is subject to Maiser Sheni, which means Maiser Rishon doesn't need to have Maiser Sheni removed from it, ever. Over here, it won't be that way. There'll be an overlap. Maiser Rishon over Maiser Sheni. There'll be a doubling of. Okay. These are enough of words of Hagdama, and let's go inside. So we're by the 2 dots. The Mishnah uses the words im. Im implies b'di'evet, and im higdim. This is by the mind. Im higdim shein l'rishain ein bekachlum. It doesn't matter. So first of all, the Gemara wants to understand: is it the way it sounds, which is only b'sha'avar? Is it only allowed post facto? That means if you did it, you're not going to be. You didn't violate, and you can say vidui meiser, but no one is telling you to do it. Or habat chiloloi, option number 1, and that's indeed the first opinion in the Gemara. However, Rabbi Ba, the son of Rabbi Barva, and Rabbi Chia, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, even though it's not mashma so from the words im, nevertheless they hold that mutar lahagdim sheni l'rishon b'd'mai. Okay. Actually, the Gemara says that not everyone agrees with that. So now we're going to have other Rambam by name that agree with the first approach of the Gemara, which is Rabbi Yaakov Barach, and according to our Girsa, and another Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi, b'shem Rabbi Shua ben Levi, that again im implies lo yasa the imasa masha asoi. I want you to know, Chavra, that the Rambam paskins what was said b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, that you can lechatchila separate it out of the order. Okay. Now, as many point out over here, in commentators, that the Gemara is going to go based on Rabbi Yochanan, b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, that you can lechatchila go out of order. And on that, the Gemara has a kasha, and that is, guys, we are at the end of Daf Yud Aleph. Mahu likba sheni b'makom rishon. These are the words in the Gemara. We're going to have 2 very different ways of understanding the kasha. We have enough time. At least we're going to read the Rash Arilio. He brings the 2 ways of understanding the question in the Gemara. We're going to learn the first option. Then we're going to learn the second option. And we're going to learn the whole sugya till the end of the Pedic, which is today and tomorrow, with the understanding of the second option, because it gets very evolved to go back and forth. But at least in the beginning, let's understand there are 2 very different ways of learning it. The first way is very simple, and we're going to choose the difficult way, the complex way. So, guys, we're going to read the Rash Arilio, the last one in the left column. It's 8 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Kigoin says that Ashadilyo, Shehifrish Maiserish. That's the first understanding of the Kasha. You separated in the right order. And then the Hifrish Mimenu Trumas Maiser. And we keep on saying that that which remains, you don't have to give to a Levi, which means that which you give is now considered your chulin. Question is, Mao l'kvoya shame ma'aser sheni v'oisa tisha atzman sh'hayorisha. That's a very simple question. What's normally ma'aser rishon, you have to separate trumas ma'aser from the ma'aser rishon, but you end up with none of it. The trumas ma'aser you give to a kohen. 1. The 9 you give to a lady. Here you're keeping the 9. Can you now say, since I'm allowed to keep the 9 because of Hamoitz and Chaveru Olav Arayas, so it's bona fide chulin, and now I want to use it. I know that for Meiser Shein, me, and Kivin the Hava Misukanam Legambi. And why? So therefore, why not? Because now Havalu Petur. These 9 can be eaten. Like we spoke out in our introduction, one of the foundational rules that when you separate Meisers, and you should do it, Al Pi Seder, you have to remember that the earlier ones are completely exempt from the latter ones. So when I have a basket of apples, I separate Truma Gedoyla. If I have after Truma Gedoyla 100 left, I normally don't give that example. I just want to give round numbers. From this, I have to separate 10 to give to a lady. Think about it. No Meiser Sheni was separated yet. When the Levi receives it, the Levi does not have to separate Meiser Sheni. When the coin received the first 2%, let's go, you're going to give 2%. From that, not Meiser Rishon, not Meiser Sheni was separated. Doesn't matter. The coin, for the coin, it's Truma, but it's completely Mesukan. The earlier ones are exempted from the latter ones. So do we say that since it's Mesukan Legamri, if it wouldn't have been Damai, it would taka be Meiser Rishon. So it's Patur. Something that's a Patur cannot be used as Meisers for something that's Mechuyev. Which is something that is not effective. Also, it doesn't only mean mentally. You can't do it, it means it's not effective. No, but the Mayakilu. Why the Mayakilu? So he explains, because since we just had in the Gemara, that you can separate Sheni before Rishon, what do you think would happen? That means when you separate Sheni before Rishon, in that case, the Meiser Rishon had Meiser Sheni removed from it. If you separate first Sheni, and then you separate Rishon, the product of Rishon, I know you're not keeping all of it, but the Meiser Minha Meiser will be something from which Meiser Sheni was removed. So maybe now it's not Ptur al Achiyuv. This is the simple question. Now we're going to learn the Oidnir Lafarish, guys. Whoever's joining right now, it's Rashid Elio, 3 lines before the bottom. What we're going to learn today and tomorrow will be based on this. Oidnir Lafarish, and whoever is learning an art scroll, he also chose to learn the second. The Gra only learns the second because the Girsas in the Gemara and Daf Yud Beis are very problematic. We will still make emendations, but it's going to fit if you're going to read the second Kash. If not, you have to push it, change a lot. You have to have another Girs. So the Oid Niro Lefarish, the Hachi Ka'amar, that me, the Magdim Sheni Mamakim, Shetzorach Lasoy Soloi Rishon. In the case where you were Mafresh Sheni before Rishon, what were to happen if you redeemed the Sheni, which is something which you could do? Can you now designate that to the Rishon and then Trumas Meiser? Could you do that? Now, let me go what we said in the intro and repeat at least one of the bases of this kasha. Normally, Mendel, produce from which Meiser Sheni is taken, produce from which Meiser Sheni is taken, was already rectified with Meiser Rishon. And because of that, this Meiser Sheni, even if you redeem it, can never be designated as Meiser Rishon for anything. Ptur al Achiyuv, it's already rectified, same concept. It's already rectified from Meiser Rishon. But since here, at least b'di'evet, and let's go with Rabbi Yechon, with Lechatchila, you can separate Sheni before Rishon. Means after you separate Sheni, you still have to deal with the Meiser Rishon / Tumas Meiser. So it's not removed from Meiser Rishon, even though it won't have any Meiser Rishon removed from it. But at least there is still a chiyuv of Meiser Rishon. So maybe if you redeem it, now you can use it for Meiser Rishon. If something is completely out, excluded, if it's not excluded, then it's not excluded. Because the 10 that you remove from Meiser Sheni, that could have been Meiser Rishon. It could have been. You're not done yet with Meiser Rishon. You end it. So if it could have been Meiser Rishon, so it could become Meiser Rishon. Masha Enkin, if you remove Meiser Rishon, you only remove Meiser Sheni from what remained. None of it can ever become Meiser Rishon. So when you are removing Meiser Sheni from something that it and the others are not shaykh to Meiser Rishon, pshita, you can't redeem it and make it Meiser Rishon. That's called Ptur al Achiyuv. Masha Enkin over here. So really, the underlying of both options are the same, but we're going to focus on this question. If you redeem Meiser Sheni first, if you separated Meiser Sheni first, of course, guys, if you're not going to redeem it, of course, you cannot make it into Trumas Meiser. But if you redeemed it, can you make it into Meiser Rishon and then to whatever, take from it the 10% and give it to the coin Meiser Minamais? That's the kasha, Daf Yud Beis. And the Gemara is going to give two opinions that are the same, which is you could, and that's going to be challenged. Rabbi Yosi ben Shol, the Gemara resolves this question, guys, on Daf Yud Beis with Hamais. Hamais hu ha'ik. That Rabbi Yosi ben Shol, Aisele Arise Pede, his sharecropper, guys, did not bring it from his field. Rabbi Yosi ben Shol had a sharecropper that bought, he acquired from an Amaretz. Pede means the Mai. And as we had on Daf Yud Aleph from Beis, let's go b'shem Rabbi Yechina, that even lechatchila you can separate first Meiser Sheni. And that's exactly what Rabbi Yosi ben Shol instructed his others to do. Amalei tzei kva sheni. And then he didn't want to have to give more away. Means whatever he bought, he already lost 10%. Now, what the step that's obvious, Yerushalmi is mekatzer. If you have Meiser Sheni and you would not poida it, of course you cannot designate it as anything else. What he meant was redeem it on coins, make a pidyon. Now you have the, whatever number it is, it became chulin. Take from it rishon. And in other words, so from says fear to think about it now. I know we're going to go by skipping the next 7 words, and we're going to continue. Hada amra. There you see shemuta lik b'sheni b'makam rishon. Furthermore, Ula bar Shmuel in the name of Rabbi Yochanan says the same, that Proiter hu Adam estivloi b'sa acha shel tevel. And when he's speaking about sa'acha shel tevel, as we point out over here, if you had 10 saw, that's when 1 saw will be enough. It's not 1 saw for any number. If you have 10 saw, you can get away from the Mai, 10 saw of the Mai, you can get away by only giving 1 saw. And what would you do? The value, you're going to lose more money because the 1 saw that you separate first from Meiser Sheni, you're going to have to redeem. We know that. We're talking about a person who's not concerned about the money. You have money, you need food. You want to keep as much as you could. You can get away by only giving up 1 saw. Normally you give over 20%. When you speak about Truma Gedoyla, and then from what remains 10%, then from what remains Meiser Sheni, it ends up more than 20. Here, you Truma Gedoyla you don't have to give. Normally you would have to give 2 separations, 1% and 10%. So you're going to end up by giving away more than 10%. Here you can get away by only giving 10%. How do you do it? But like we just said, Ketzad, maybe Sa'acha Shel Tevel. You take 1 from the 10. The first step is, once you separate Meiser and HaMeiser, which would be 1%, my friends, from the 10, 1% will be 0.1. That's it. That's Trumas Meiser. Then you're going to have to separate another 10% from Meiser Sheni. But if you separate 1 saw by making it first Meiser Sheni, which is, let's go even now, B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan, Muta Lachatchila, and here at least he writes the words Upoida Oisa, then B'Choizer V'Oisa Oisa, then you make it into Meiser Rishon. Why are you making it into Meiser Rishon? even though by Demai you don't give it, but taking off Trumas Meiser means that there is this theoretical Meiser separation. And by the way, Meiser is 10%. So if you have 10, I'm speaking about here, he had 10 saw of Demai. One, this one is Meiser. And from it, let me add another step. How much from it, David, do you have to give as Meiser and a Meiser? 1/10. How much do you have left from this one? 9/10. These 9/10, now that you did the Trumas Meiser, is yours. And since it's yours, you can use these 9/10. That if you have other produce, then has to be Meiser Rishon. You can use this for Meiser Rishon. Utrumas Meiser l'makom acher. This last line is not the topic that we were discussing. And this also, really, if you think about it, you have an issue of Ptur al-Achiyuv that I don't want to get into because that's not the focus of the Gemara. What is the focus of the Gemara? Both from the story of Rabbi Yosef ben Shol and from the psak that Ula bar Yishmael said, B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan, this lekuda, that by Demai, if you go out of order, you separate Meiser Sheni. If you redeem it, you can use that same produce for Meiser Rishon / Meiser Min HaMeiser. And the Gemara is going to challenge it. So, the Gemara, now we're going to read the challenge today, and we're going to, tomorrow, this is very important, this is a very important detailed, details of Meisers that we never learned yet together, in my memory. We're going to repeat to appreciate Daf Yud Gimel. We're going to have to chazit a little bit of a attempted answer and taka refute. And we're going to say it cannot be. Such a thing could not be allowed. Why not? So we're going to begin with a Mishnah and then with a Brais. So Nachas, Ula Lataman V'Amr B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan, and when Ula went to Babel, we just learned over Shavuos, Ula used to travel back and forth a lot. He never ended up living there. He actually sadly passed away in Babel, but he went a lot back and forth. That was a tragedy that he didn't make. He was buried there, but he did not pass away there. So he came back to Babel. He came back with this teaching of Rabbi Yechanan. So V'Chavron Ilavei, there was a chevra that gathered against him. In other words, against him in a holy way. How can you say such a thing? And they did not accept it. Now, who articulated the brilliant question? It's mamish brilliant, Rab Sheshes. Heisev Rab Sheshes. And the kasha is from a Mishnah and a subsequent Braisa. The Masnisa Pliga, which means the way the Yerushalmi says, Rabbi Yechanan cannot argue with the Mishnah. So when you say, Mishnah argues, it means is the Chagish in Rabbi Yechanan. The Mishnah that we're quoting now is a Mishnah that we have later in this Masechta Perek Zayin. What's the case of the Mishnah? The Gemara inside is Mekatzit, and we will read the Shinun Uschais to read the case. Let's first read the last words of this Amud. Here we're not speaking about Demai. Guys, remember, we're speaking about Tevel. You have 2 baskets of Tevel. Whoever came now, it's good enough, even though you're going to miss some of it, but you'll get some of it. We're speaking on these numbers, guys, you have to help up. We're speaking about a person, we're going to go basket 1, basket 2. Both of them already had from it Truma Gedolah removed. If not, the numbers won't fit. What's yet to be removed are 2 Meisers, Meiser Rishon. Let's go in the years Meiser Shem. Like we mentioned, you could remove Meisers from within. You could remove from basket 1 both Meisers from it for it. Basket 2 from it for it. We're calling that within. And you are allowed to remove the Meisers from without. That means I can designate whatever needs to be designated Lema'ais Rois. For basket 1, David, I can separate it from basket 2. And I'll go even more. I can separate from basket 2 for both basket 1 and for basket 2. Some from without, some from within. Menamukav is an issue by Truma, and we already dealt with Truma, so let's not even go there. But Rabbeinu is reminding us, when it comes to Truma, yes, you could do it, but you have to bring them together. It's not Negeya. And by the way, if it's together, you can do it. Well, let's not be worried about the issue of, does it have to be near? Does it have to be far? It could be far because it's only Mises, but that's not the point. Now, read inside the Shinun Uschais, the 2 cases of the Mishnah to appreciate what's Tutzakta. If the person says, V'amar, guys, you have Shinun Uschais Gimel, Maisra Shal Zeh Bizu, you're saying Mises from basket 2 should be for basket number 1, if you make that statement. So what happened? Your statement is effective. Whatever the percent that we're going to speak out in a moment is in basket 2, and basket 1 is Masukan. Right. So Harishoina Mu'useres and Shalom al Yisrael. What happens if a person says crazy thinking? It's not crazy thinking because he wants to give more, both to the Levi, as we'll see, and he wants to have more Ma'aseh Sheni. He says Shalzu Bezu v'Shalzu Bezu. Shalzu Bezu v'Shalzu Bezu. So here's the issue. The first basket is Mu'usar. Why? Because both of them were not yet tithe. They're both mechuyev to have tithings from it. When you separate Trumas or Maasros from without, there has to be a similarity between both piles. They both have to have the same obligation. That's called, you can only be ma'as and menachiv alachiv. If something is already exempted, it cannot be used as Maasros for something that's still mechuyev. Simple rule. So you said shalzu bezu, shalzu bezu. So the first basket number 1 is good because its Maasros are in basket number 2. Even though you physically did not remove it, since you designated, that's enough. Now basket 1, all of it is Mesukin. So when you now say, and now what's going to fix basket number 2, basket number 1, it can't work because basket number 1 is Ptur, to Ein Ma'asrin, Min Ptur Alachiv. Which means that what do you need to separate from basket number 2? Not only Maasros for basket number 1, that statement was valid, you didn't separate it yet, but since your second statement was ineffective, so you also have to separate from basket number 2 for basket number 2. So far it's simple. The question now is the chap of the, okay, 1 second, we're good? Yeah. This is the simple part. Now it's going to get fun. How much percent do you separate from basket number 2? Half of that will be for basket number 1, half will be for basket number 2. When I have a basket of 100 apples, let's speak about where you already removed Truma Gedolah, like I spoke out in the intro. How many apples will go for both Maasros? Only 19. Only 19. Why only 19? Because I have to separate 10 as Maaseh addition. And the din is that when you separate Maasros from within, once you removed Maaseh addition, you only have to separate 10% from what remains. You never separate the new Maaseh Sheni 10% for that which you already fixed, because Maaseh addition doesn't need to have Maaseh Sheni removed from it. They're separate, which is really going to be the reason why normally Maaseh Sheni itself normally cannot be redeemed and made into Maaseh addition, because Maaseh Sheni is not shaykh to Maaseh addition. Very good. So what you would do is you would separate 19. Now let's go on our case. Now we're saying you have 2 baskets. They both need to have the separations done, but everything is coming from basket number 2. What's 19 times 2? 38. 38. So based on the normal way you would cheshbon, now that the Mishnah says shalzu bezu v'shalzu bezu, harishoina worked. The first one and all of, but the second one cannot have Maasros from basket number 1. Okay, so you have to take it from within. 19 and 19. Max. Problem is, turn to that based on the base, the kind of law, but we learned that, but I said giving numbers, it's like that, you know how much you give. Noitel, minashniya, you know how much you give from the second? I know this is interesting talking. Just don't get stuck in the semantics. I'll read the semantics and I'll tell you what it means. Shtei pa'amim shnei isurin. Guys, what's an esed? 10%. David, what's 2 isurin? 20. Just like 20. 2 times 20 is 40. So not only not 38, 40, that's not enough. And 10 from the 40, how much is 10 from 40? 4. 44, and the Isur Shalisa, which is 44.4. And the question is, the problem is, first of all, before we move on to the kasha, how in the heck do you get 44? It should be, like I said, 10, 9, 10 and 9 is 38. And that's the answer. The answer is that the Gemara doesn't even have to give. Is that that's one of the differences of whether you remove Trumas or Maasros from within or from without. When you remove it from within, you start with 100. Let's speak about Maaseh addition. How much is Maaseh addition? 10. How much do you have left? 90. So really, to be Mesakin 90, you give 10. Halkot, to be Mesakin 90, you give 10. If I'm separating my sedition from basket 2 for basket number 1, nothing is leaving basket number 1. How many do you have in basket number 1? You have 100. You can't say give 10 from basket 2 for basket number 1. No, because here you are remaining with all of it. So if 10 is good for 90, so when you give 10 from basket number 1, 10, how much did you fix 90? How much do you have to give for the other 10? And more. Why? Because 1 is good for 9. So you have 10 for 90. For the next 9, you have to give 1. But then you still have 0.1. You still have, for that, you round it off to 0.1. It's a rounded off. It's really going to be a droplet. So first of all, if you look at this, when you give it from within, just my sedition will be 10 for the 90, but you're only going to remain with 90. If you want to remain with the 100, you have to give 11.1. Now comes the Iker, step number 2. No, because from the 11.1, you're going to give Tumas Meiser, 10% from it. But we're not even looking at that. Now let's go weiter. Another nafkamina. When you separate Tumas and Meisers from within, like we mentioned, Meiser Rishon, the 10 that you remove doesn't have to have Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani removed from it. Here, it doesn't work that way. That's going to be really the kash. Here, all of what remains, all of it has to have Meiser Sheni removed from it. Because you're keeping the whole 100 in basket number 1. So how much do you have to remove of Meiser Sheni? Same thing. Meiser Sheni is 10%. How much do we say is 10%? Jewish cheshbonis, 11.1. So how much is that together? 22.2. For one basket. Now, really, being that basket number 2 needs to have Meises removed from it, here you can argue, only give 19. So that's another nuance, that when a person said, Shalzu bezu, what he also wanted is it should be the same, l'chumra. And since, to be Mesaken basket number 1, you have to give from 2, 11.1 for each Meise. 22.2. So now, from within, you have to give 22.2. 22.2 times 2 is how much? 24. But here we have the kicker. Mitamol, now that we established that when you separate Meises from without, it's not that the earlier Meiser Rishon is not Shayach to Meiser Sheni. It's not true. Because this whole number 44.4 is based on the premise that since you're keeping the 100, after you dealt with Meiser Rishon, you have to deal with all of it for Meiser Sheni. We're going to view this as there's already a Shaychus Ben Zeloza. If Rabbi Yechanan is right, in the case of the Mai, that if you separated Meiser Sheni first, here you could redeem it and make it into Meiser Rishon. So why would you have to separate 44.4, which is 4 times Meiser? Every Meiser is 11.1. Why would you not be allowed to separate 11.1 for Meiser Rishon? You're taking it from basket 2 for basket 1. Then you're taking from basket 2 the second 11.1 as Meiser Sheni for basket number 1. Why would you now not be allowed to redeem that 11.1? Make it now, the Meiser Sheni, make it into Meiser Rishon for basket number 2, and only have to separate one more time 11.1 for basket number 2 on basket number 2, which is 33.3. You're not going to need 44.4. Let's read it inside. If Rabbi Yechanan is right, then in the case of the Ma, you could redeem the Meiser Sheni and designate it as the Meiser Rishon. And as we are explaining, that normally produce from which Meiser Sheni is taken is already rectified from Meiser Rishon, which is why you cannot do it. But here, once we are saying that the rectified produce is not rectified yet, there is a connection between them. Because it's not like you are removing 10 and then you only have to deal with the 90. The fact that you're giving 11.1 times 2 means everything that was rectified from Meiser Rishon, all of it still has to be rectified from Meiser Sheni. So they're connected. So Eibazoi, v'yaso oisam sheni v'yiftein. V'yas sheni means you have to separate 11.1 from isolation. That you have to do. The kasha is the second separation from basket 2 on basket 1, which is 11.1, which is becoming a sheni. Why can you now stop? Redeem that 11.1. V'yachzed v'yase, guys, we're going to skip we're going to go just with my edition. Make that into my edition. Now, I know you still have to separate my sheni and a chanan. The Gemara is not asking that 22.2 will be enough. The Gemara's kasha is let 33.3 be enough. The fact that we don't have such an option is arayim that you can never redeem Meiser Sheni and make it into Meiser Rishon. The Gemara tomorrow is going to try to show how these two cases are different, but the Gemara is going to say it's not different. The underlying rules should be the same. So this refutes the sheet of Rabbi Yechanan. This was great. To be continued.
Amazing.